This is the Art of Darkness podcast with Kevin Kautzman.
And Abby Lucas.
We're a couple of very online writers interested in the dark side of creativity.
This show is about art and the people who make it, what it costs them, and what it takes to bring something unique and impactful into the world.
On each episode, we examine the life and work of an artist you might think you know.
Don't worry, they're all safely dead.
We aren't. Find us online at artofdarkpod.com, and please support the show through Patreon or Substack. You get extra stuff. Thank you. We're back with another episode of Art of Darkness, podcast about the dark side of creativity. This is a dark room. We're joined by one of my very favorite people. But first, I got to ask my co-host, Abby, how are you? Are you feeling dark?
Oh, always.
Always. I'm getting great feedback on the Hunter episode. I'm very happy about that. And people are mentioning the Chanel episode a lot, too, as a bit of a feeling like that was a good way to start the Abby Lucas era of Art of Darkness. A little bit of a curveball and a lot of fun. So that's great. I went on Rare Candy yesterday with the great Glenn Lockney. They're great. Glenn is doing really well. We talked about, it was a very light episode. We talked about the Downward Spiral and Lost Highway. And so just real mellow, real chill episode. Nothing too heavy came up, but everybody can go and listen to that. And they're doing like a Patreon special right now. So go and support those guys. They're great. Nobody else is doing quite what they do. They're horsing, but they're also covering a lot of arts and culture. They're not really doing exactly what we do, but they're adjacent for sure, and they're friends. But we're joined by a fellow artist, a collaborator of ours, the unofficial company member of Badmouth Theater Company. He's one of our very close pals, Matthew Saxe. Matt, how are you?
I'm great, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, Kevin.
Of course, yeah. Welcome. You're Art of Darkness family now. There's no getting out. So today, all these dark rooms, these are sort of our interview episodes, right? But they're always contextualized in one or more of the subjects we've already covered. And you said you would like to come on and talk about possibly Tennessee Williams and Samuel Beckett. And so I've kind of prepared a rough outline. I found I think a Greek dissertation or a master's thesis. I think it's a master's thesis on yeah, right. Yeah, just a quick Google search on Beckett's influence on late Williams. So I figured we would talk a little bit about that. Yeah, and let me just get my outline real quick, and then Matthew, I'll let you introduce yourself to everybody. But we're gonna talk about Williams. We're going to talk about Beckett. We're going to talk more about Williams than Beckett. I've got a little outline of his biography just to bring people up to speed. I always tease the After Dark, which is for patrons. And on the After Dark for this episode, we are going to, of course, read from Catching the Big Fish, because it is our year of Lynch. We have some Tennessee Williams poetry. And then I want to talk about, because we like to keep the spicy, like the extra spicy stuff for the After Dark. I want to talk about Tennessee Williams' sex life, both from his perspective. He wrote his memoirs, and there's a great article in the New York Times about it that's very funny. He was very, very witty. But I also found an article from bi.org, the bisexual website, right? And they talk about Tennessee Williams' bisexuality. So I want to sort of dissect that a little bit, and so we'll save that for patrons. Go and support the pod, artofdarkpod.com, patreon.com/artofdarkpod. But before we get into the Tennessee Williams bio, let me introduce Matt. I know I'm yapping a little bit, but let me introduce Matt. So Matt is an actor local to the Twin Cities, but he has lived in L.A., from St. Louis, went to school in Alabama, Roll Tide.
Yes, Roll Tide.
One of my good football buddies. He's a ball knower. Matthew Saxe is a ball knower, and he originated the role of one half of the cast of my play Moderation, which is opening at the Hope Theatre in London on the 19th of this month, March 2025. Go to moderationplay.com. Tickets are on sale now. Matthew.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for being a part of Moderation.
Oh,
you're in the book.
Yeah, I know I love it so much. I thought it was such a I was so honored to be a part of it. It's so prescient, and also I think it's just so smart and
Oh,
interesting, funny, and all those things that I
oh,
love.
please, please keep going.
All the things that I love about doing a play were
Mm,
in, and I got to do it with Amanda, who's the best,
hmm
and
Hmm.
directed by you and Abby's visuals, behind
hmm
the screen, and just our entire, crew was amazing, and Ariel's lights and
Oh
everything.
yeah, we had a great gathering for the St. Paul production. Yeah.
Yeah, everything you want a world premiere play production to be, and the kind of text that you want to work on and sink your teeth into as an actor. And I loved it, and I've been looking at the, Hope's posts and Robbie, who's playing he in London's stuff, and he and I have exchanged a few messages. And I'm super,
Oh, that's nice.
no, I'm thrilled. He looks like an amazing performer, watching some of clips of stuff he's done on British television and everything. Uh, so I think
I
it's,
had I have a funny coincidental story where I met Robbie at a networking event for the London Film Festival, completely independently of all of this. And at the networking event, he got an email saying that he'd got a role in a play, and he did this little dance. He's like a very energetic guy, and we all congratulated him. He didn't tell us what the play was or anything like this. And then when Lydia the director, had announced that he was in the play, I messaged him and I said, "Was it moderation that you had got when we were at this networking event?" And it was.
wow, amazing.
This is further evidence of one of our key theses on Art of Darkness is that there are only 25,000 people alive at any given time. They're
I
just
get
trying
to
they're
be one of
just
those people.
you're one of those people. You're one of those people, Abby, for sure. Matthew, I have to say, one of my highlights of working on moderation with you, because again, it's a two-hander. There's nowhere to hide. You're on stage the entire
Mm.
time, more or less. And one of my highlights was watching you on a religious holiday. You were fasting and
Yes,
doing the work around that holiday.
Oh my gosh.
What was that like?
it was an intense day because, I think I want to say it was a Saturday.
I think it was. Yeah.
It was Yom Kippur. I'm Jewish, so I was
Mhm.
observing Yom Kippur, which is the holiest holiday, the Day of Atonement. It's the one day where we're forgiven for our sins. And so, yeah, I started fasting the night before at sundown, and before the night's performance that night. So, like Friday night,
Oh
uh,
wow.
didn't go to the Kol Nidre services because I had the show, but I had started fasting at about 5 o'clock, and did the Friday night show on the empty stomach, and then
Oh,
went to rehearsals, went to the services, and fasted all through the day, and then you know came to the theater to do the show that night, and I think I texted you for an aspirin or an ibuprofen because
I recall. Yes, yes, and I remember you had this. You're always intense. You're an intense person when you're acting. It's like an athlete getting ready to play. A playoff game. Like it's serious. And yeah, I remember you just had this look like I. Yeah, I was extra sensitive to your because I could pick up that you were. You told us, so I appreciate the warning. Yeah, I get real hangry.
body by now. Like I don't like to eat before a show anyway. Like I usually give myself a 3 hour
Mm.
for a show anyway, of eating and not counting like water or mints or something like that. But that day, you go to services, and the Yom Kippur service is very serious and very long, and you haven't eaten, and it's just a long day. And I think also I'm trying to remember if that Saturday was also the same day. It was a Saturday, so I think it was a football day. I don't think it was the day that Alabama lost to Vanderbilt,
To
which made,
Vanderbilt. You were so devastated. You were so unhappy. I felt bad, dude.
but I think there was don't remember if that was a game day or not, and I was trying to like keep up with if that was all the same day, my God,
No, it wasn't. It wasn't all the same day. No, no.
that would have been awful. But it was an experience, like I think by the time it was getting to be around the show, I didn't want to eat. Sundown had already happened because the show was like at 7:30, but I don't like to eat too much before a show. So I think I did have like
Mm.
I want to say like I had like some kind of like energy drink or something, which I'm not a big fan of, but I felt like I needed to give me something. And I know I had a headache, and that's why I asked for the ibuprofen asp, and just felt like I'm gonna use all this. When you feel like
Yeah.
that, you just got to use it in the work. So I put it into the character. And then there is a scene in moderation where the character gets to eat, they're sitting at their desk eating lunch.
Hmm.
A little advantage of that. And I ate a little more than I usually ate that night.
You're welcome. It's right in the play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
left Amanda to do the rest of the scene with because she takes my food and eats it. Spoiler for.
Yeah, right. Spoiler alert. Oh no, you just ruined it. You cut our ticket sales in half. Well,
And how did the performance feel that night?
I felt on. I felt sharp. I honestly do. Like, I'm not the best judge of my own work in some ways. I can only tell. Sometimes I can tell if the show is really good or really bad. That's like my barometer. Like, I can tell if a show is really good or really bad. If it's just good or in the middle, I'm kind of like
Mm.
need people to tell me how'd you feel about it, what'd you think. I'm not a good barometer on that. But if it's really good or really bad, I can tell. And I felt good about that night's performance.
well, I was there every night. There was never a night where it was just completely whack.
Thank,
So great work. Really
thank you.
great work. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And of course, that was here in St. Paul, Minnesota. And we're doing it in London here now this month. And I'm so glad that you're chatting with Robbie. And I know everybody
Mm.
appreciates your enthusiasm. Um, Awesome. Let's talk about Tennessee Williams and Samuel Beckett, shall we? And I'm sure we'll talk more about our work and everything. I just feel so cozy. It's just a real collaborative day here. It's everybody's here. The gang's all here. Um, so I like giving brief biographies of the artists that we're talking about on the Dark Rooms, just to recontextualize it. You can go back and listen to the episode. Tennessee was born Thomas Lanier Williams in 1911 in Columbus, Mississippi. Moved with his family to St. Louis, your hometown, a city he later described with disdain, finding solace instead in writing. Of course, we all know his major plays, The Glass Menagerie, and A Streetcar Named Desire, and those catapulted him into the dramatic pantheon with the great Eugene O'Neill, who we'll be covering this year, and Arthur Miller, whom we'll eventually cover. Um, Streetcar became the second play in history to win both the Pulitzer and the New York Drama Critics Circle Award. Um, he explored the tension between illusion and reality, a romantic vision of a fading South, and the desperate longing for human connection, drawing from his own family and experience. His later works included The Night of the Iguana, 1961. He was hailed on the cover of Time magazine as the world's greatest living
Mm.
playwright. But after 1961, critics and audiences found his more experimental and abstract plays challenging. And we'll talk a little bit about that because that abstraction is an echo of Beckett, or was at least like influenced possibly by most probably by Beckett. And his plays continue to be performed around the world. I want to read a few paragraphs from this bisexuality. This is bi.org. They may be a little biased. See, I had that queued up. Haha. He was the middle of three children. His relationship with his parents was fraught, to put it mildly. His parents' marriage was an unhappy one between a mother who did most of his rearing and an alcoholic, abusive, traveling shoe salesman of a father.
Mm.
As such, they figured prominently as troubled sources of inspiration in his later works. He was close to his sister Rose, who developed schizophrenia and was lobotomized to curb her misbehaviors, which of course is the
Mm.
motif and the plot of The Glass Menagerie. They remained close throughout the course of William's life, and he later used his royalties to pay for her care. Fun fact, I actually got some royalties from Tennessee Williams by way of the Sewanee Writers Conference. Sewanee, the University of the South. He left his estate to Sewanee, and they have an annual writers conference, which is fantastic if you can get there. And it is the rare writers conference in the United States where playwrights are invited next to the fiction writers and the nonfiction writers. Very often it's poetry, fiction, nonfiction, these conferences. In this case, because Tennessee left his estate to Sewanee, they invite playwrights. And one year I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship. So I too saw some of his royalties. How fun is that? He had no children, so he just left his money to this
Just
university.
Kevin.
Yeah, just can't. Well, hey, listen. If anybody out there is feeling, is childless and wants to adopt, Abby and I are will happily be your.
If anyone wants to leave their estate to our Patreon.
Yeah, really. Yeah, just literally. Yeah. Can you imagine? People start leaving estates to podcasts. I mean, that one person could change everything. It would be amazing.
People leave their estates to Directors UK, the sort of guild that we have over here.
Yeah, really good. Well, we're
Yeah.
going to talk more about this bisexuality article, bi.org. I think it's bi.org. Hey, why not? I want to bring Matt in a little more here. Well, and then Abby too. I have a question for you. Matt, have you acted in any of Williams' work? And if not, well, I mean, maybe answer the question first. Yeah.
I was in Williams' work. I performed 27 Wagons Full of Cotton while I was in college for the National Tennessee Williams Symposium, which was hosted at my college my senior year. And it was like a 2 or 3 day conference. And this performance was the centerpiece on the last night of it. And I got to perform.
Cool.
Yeah, it was amazing. So it's a 3-person show. It's one of his short plays. It became the basis for the movie Baby Doll. And uh, yeah, it was the centerpiece. So I'm performing it for a very small audience of all these scholars and, intellectuals and academics who are there for talking about Williams for 3 days, 2 nights. And we did it in the round, like in a little platform stage, like even on the floor of a hotel conference room with like surrounded on all 4 sides with people attending the symposium. It was not open to the public. It was just for the people of the symposium. And it was great. It was a great performance. I felt we did it only the one time. And after the show, all the people were coming up to us and talking with us about it and everything. And people who had known Williams when he was alive, conference. And, one of them said to me, like, oh, Tom would have loved that. And I was like, oh my God. Someone who knew Williams said Tom would have loved that. And I was like, oh, they're calling him Tom. Okay.
All right, we're calling
Serious
it Tom
stuff.
for the rest. Yeah, for the rest of the episode.
And I was like, "Ooh, that's lovely to hear." So,
Mhm.
Because you never know. Like, I found that a lot of academics, who talk about theater and write and stuff about theater, unless they're like actively directing or working with actors, they don't seem to like the shows when they go and see them and everything. It's like
Mm.
in Shakespeare, like he never thought he saw any good or great Shakespearean performances. He was more intellectual in reading about it. He didn't seem to like Shakespeare, The Invention of the Human, or whatever his book was. For somebody who loved Shakespeare so much, he sure seemed not to like performances and actors performing it and everything. So I was curious of how that audience would react to our performance, and they honestly really enjoyed it. Nothing but amazing positive feedback. And the director who talked with people about it afterwards said, yeah, nothing but positive feedback. People really enjoyed it. I mean, they leaped out of their seats when it was over and were applauding and cheering. It was so loud in a small, hotel conference room, but man, it felt great. And it was amazing.
Cool.
So I performed Williams. Obviously, I've read it. I directed a scene for it from Cat on a Hot Tin Roof when I was in my directing class in college. I have a lot of ties to Williams because of the hometown connection and seeing multiple performances of different works of his.
Mm.
So it's Louis, and I'm very tied and connected to Williams.
How does St. Louis feel about Williams? Is it an embrace?
I would say yes. I mean, he's on our Walk of Fame, which is in a neighborhood in University City, near where he grew up. There's a St. Louis Walk of Fame with like local celebrities on it and historical figures, uh, and like W.C. Handy, and John Goodman and Marlon Perkins, etc. So Tennessee Williams was one of the first people on that Walk of Fame, and the town embraces him and loves him, even if like people aren't too aware of his work. People are aware that he's from there,
Mm.
and um, and most of us, I think, have I feel like I can say this. Most of us have the attitude like, yeah, he disdained it and kind of in his younger days and couldn't get away from it, couldn't wait to get away from it, and went away to college and went away from it and wrote slightly negatively of it pretty negatively of it in a lot of ways. And as he got older, he came around, and there's a passage where he wrote like, I wouldn't be the writer that I was if I hadn't.
Mm.
It wasn't T.S. Eliot who completely turned his back on St. Louis and like
Right.
died, living there and became a pseudo British, person. T.S. Eliot completely, who was born and raised in St. Louis, where his father was like a college professor, completely turned his back on St. Louis
Oh,
and the
I did not know T.S. Eliot
Mm.
was from St. Louis. I didn't know
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Hmm.
But he would never have like talked about it or admitted it. Williams, was not born there, but went to school and high school there, like Tom in the Glass Menagerie. The high school that they say in the Glass Menagerie that Tom and Laura went to, Soldan, where he went to high school. Obviously, he used his own high school for it, and it's where my high school football coach went to high school too. Uh, Connection. Um,
Those.
he came around. He came around a
Hmm.
little about towards St. Louis. I don't know if he ever really traveled back to it much or anything like that, but he wrote, one of his later plays was A Lovely Sunday for Creve Coeur, which is where I grew up. I grew up in the suburb of St. Louis, Creve Coeur, which was more countrified when he was a young man. It wasn't the suburbs yet. It was a place where people, like the characters in the play, take the trolley or something out to go to Creve Coeur Park to have a picnic and something. They never get there,
Be
obviously.
be like
Mister.
White Bear Lake used to be out here. People used to take the trolley up to White Bear. Yeah.
Yeah. So for not being fond of the city, his first big hit, The Glass Menagerie, is set there.
Mm.
And he mentions a ton of local things in the play. And then the later play, Lovely Sunday for Creve Coeur, is set in St. Louis and going to the suburbs of St. Louis and to the country. And and so he came around to it, I think. And the Menagerie wouldn't be the play it is if it weren't set in St. Louis with his family. I feel that strongly. He
Hmm.
Mhm.
uses local landmarks in it. And when I see a production of it that kind of ignores those elements of it, I feel like, you're missing something special in it. If you cut the little mentions of the city that he put into it, you're you're not telling the full play. You're not showing the full
Mm.
city and growing up there and how it affected these Southerners moving to a more industrial city that's not quite Southern, but not quite Eastern, but not quite Western, but not quite
Mm.
either. Um, so when people cut those things from it, like I went and saw the Glass Menagerie and it was done at the Guthrie here in Minneapolis, they cut a few things. And I was listening to a podcast from some local people talking about seeing the show, and they couldn't tell where it was set. Like they were like, I think it's,
Oh.
I couldn't tell, like they were like, they talked a lot about the play, but they couldn't tell where it was set. And I was like, ugh, that showed me like that maybe they cut too many local references. They kept a few, um, like when Tom and the gentleman caller are standing outside the door waiting for, Laura and Amanda to let them in. Uh, the gentleman caller talks about reading in the paper. He gets the sports section and he talks about Dizzy Dean, who was a pitcher, famous baseball pitcher for the St. Louis Cardinals, who my grandfather loved. And I think they kept that part in because that's, something that you can't really cut. But other things that about the city, they cut some things here and there. So like these people who had never seen Glass Menagerie before were talking about it on their podcast, and they couldn't tell where it was from. Like they thought maybe it was New Orleans. I was like, no, no, much of the
I
local.
It's a great coincidence that you're going down this train of thinking because something on Twitter is happening today that is one of my absolute pet peeves. This happens perennially. Genre writers for clout will periodically attack The Great Gatsby. because they know everybody had to read it in high school. You click on their bios and it's always, sci-fi writer and da da da. Okay. And they're bitter about it and they always attack Gatsby. And then I read the comments to get enraged. I read the thread. They're like, yeah, it's terrible. Oh yeah, they made me read that. I hated that. I don't get it. Da da da. It drives me to such a fury. I have so much bile about that. I am in the other Saint. I'm further up the river in St. Paul, where Fitzgerald is from, and where, in fact, The Great Gatsby happens. Because The Great Gatsby is written by Nick Carraway when he comes home. It is a Midwestern novel about a guy from Minnesota writing about a dude from North Dakota. And if you asked any of those guys in the genre fiction thread about it, they'd go, no, it's set in New York. It's set in the Northeast. It's a story about the Northeast. And it just drives me to fury. And let me turn that into a question, right? How do you think that specificity um, is necessary for work like this? What do you think is lost when they sort of, move it out of place?
I think that because because Menagerie specifically is a memory play, when you take away the location of where those memories took place
Hmm.
and make them bland and generic and remove those specificities, you're not being true to the memory. The memory
Hmm.
elements of Menagerie are like, Tom admits, like, I'm a magician. I've got tricks up my sleeve. And the things that are in the city that he rants and raves about keeping him down are specific. And they're specific
Hmm.
that, tie him to the city. He's a St. Louisan. He's not a Southerner. Amanda, his mother's a Southerner who was moved to St. Louis. But Tom,
That stuff is so important. Yes, yes.
that's such an important element of the play. Amanda doesn't fit in St. Louis because she's a Southerner from a Mississippi
Hmm.
station, and she's been moved to this city. The
It, it, there's a laziness to it. Oh, we don't need that,
Yeah,
right? Oh, there people aren't going to be able to relate to that. As if like half the population of the Twin Cities who frequent the Guthrie Theater aren't from somewhere else,
yeah,
Hmm.
right? Haven't got. I went through that exact struggle coming off the farm in North Dakota to move to the city. That's the story of the last century, as much as anything else, is the move from the country to the city.
yeah. It's part
Yeah,
of
Abby.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, I mean, that they always say the rule in like drama, film, play, whatever it is that the more specific something is, the more universal it is. So if you remove the specificity in the hopes of making it more universal to everyone, that actually doesn't achieve the objective because it's within the specificity of something, the character, the location, whatever it is, that it opens the universality up to people.
I think that's very true. Like, I might not know like local references to places and things that are set in, say, London or
Hmm.
anywhere like that, a place that I'm not entirely familiar with. But when I watch something that's set in a specific place and people bring in local elements to it, I love that because it gives me a
Mm.
color and touch of what those people do and see and interact with every day. So,
Well, and there might also be something that they have that you also have, and you're like, well, we have that too.
yeah,
Or like how there are, certain cultures that actually have more similarities than differences, but they wouldn't know unless you got into the specificity of those things.
right. I think like in Menagerie specifically, Laura talks about where she goes, where she skips class, where she skips the typing school, secretarial school. And she talks and she gives a list, like Amanda asked her, what did you do? Where did you go? And she's like, well, I didn't do nothing. I went to the park, which is Forest Park, which is a park in St. Louis that was designed by the same person who designed Central Park. It's bigger than Central Park in New York. And she goes to the Jewel Box. And people are like, oh, that's something Williams made up, the Jewel Box. No, it's an actual greenhouse that's, and it's not just a nice symbolic thing that she went into a jewel box,
Right.
protect herself.
Right.
It's a real place.
Yeah, and you can, and this is where dramaturgy, good dramaturgy, can really, really help. Somebody who is attached to a production, and if not a dramaturge, then a director can do this, can go,
Mm.
here's your reading, here's your 20 pages of reading about St. Louis at the time of this production. And it's a choice. You can say, we're not so concerned about that. But yeah, go on, Abby, you've directed.
It's good. Yeah, I mean, it's to be able to do that sort of research on specific things in a play grounds the actor more in the reality of the situation that they're performing.
I think so. I really do. I think it's an important element for a lot of shows, and specifically for Menagerie. If you're cutting the stuff that's St. Louis specific to it, you're not giving the true perception that Tom, Amanda, and Laura have of it, and how
Mm.
the places they go, and the places like Laura loves those places. She loves the Jewel Box. She loves going to the zoo and seeing the penguins. She loves the botanical gardens. Tom hates and disdains like the his job at the warehouse. Uh,
Mm.
and Amanda works at the department store Famous Bar, and she hated working selling lingerie there. My grandma worked at Famous Bar. Uh, yeah, she was a telephone operator for them and worked there. She was a telephone operator and she worked there. I'm trying to remember if there was the same job. She was an operator, but she also worked at Famous Bar, the department store, which is a famous department store in St. Louis. Like
It's
when
just pure
famous,
pure Mad Men. Matt,
yeah,
you're yeah, just sit there. She knows all the secrets. She knows
Yeah.
who the big boss is sleeping with on the side.
but like those things, like that was a time when cities had their own, individual department stores. Like here in
Right.
Minneapolis, Dayton's, in
Dayton's.
Texas,
Mm.
Alice, there was their own store. Macy's and the famous stores in like in New York, Macy's and
Mm.
etc. And in St. Louis, it was Famous Bar. It was the fancy, huge department store. And Amanda had to take a job there, and she had to sell lingerie and underwear, and she was embarrassed by it. And
Mm.
uh, if you cut saying, I worked at Famous Bar, I hated working at, and you just say I worked at the department store, it's not the same.
No.
Right. Right. And you're losing the poetry of
Yeah,
place. Let's call it
Mm.
that. Let's call it the poetry of place.
yeah.
Yeah.
Between department store and Famous Bar.
Yeah.
That,
Right. Right. And there's that quality of I had a professor who loved this word, and I use it very sparingly, but the quality of like ache. There's
mhm.
like there's a
Mm.
yearning inside that specificity, that the
Mm.
famous bar, and how ironic it is that she should be sad about having to work this lowly job at famous bar.
Yeah,
I remember when we moved I moved with my girlfriend to the city here. One of her first jobs was over at the Macy's downtown, or it might have even been the Dayton. You know what I mean? And having to go sling coffee at Starbucks, that's your first job, and it just how mortifying it is as a young person. I mean, but you look back on it with a kind of fondness too.
Mm.
But yeah, in any case, Matthew, you were going to say something.
oh no, it's just I think, you know, to circle back and just like reiterate it, I think whenever you cut local references in a show to try and make it more universal, because you think like, oh, the audience won't know these references, so and we can cut some stuff and we need to shave some time off. Not only is it interfering with the writer's work and intent and words, but it takes away from the place of the show. And
Mm.
plays don't just happen in general places. They happen in specific places.
Right.
They don't
Well,
just
and you're also taking away the audience's opportunity to learn about a new place because how many times has something happened in a TV show or whatever, and you jump on Wikipedia immediately to like find out what that is?
yeah, yeah. You see something set in a place and you're like, oh, that's a cool building, that's a cool lake, that's a cool looking uh thing. I want to know where that is. Where is that? Where is this set? It's an element. And you're taking away something from the work of the writer and taking away something from the audience to learn and experience if you just put it into the blandness of generality. So I have I think it's important for all his shows to where he mentions specific places and specific things and food items, like he does again in Menagerie. He mentions a specific kind of salad dressing mustard that they use that's a local one. He put those details in to be specific.
Hmm.
And the reason, Amanda says she's going to serve the salmon loaf with the Durkee's dressing is because that was a fancy mustard dressing that cost money.
Mm.
Family,
Right.
they were going to serve it. So it's an element in the show. So cut it. You're cutting, like, she's just saying she's going to serve dressing. Well, anyone can serve dressing. No, she's serving the.
That's right. And the actors should do their homework to
Yeah,
know this. You've got to
Yeah.
do your home. Yeah, that's homework for
yeah,
sure.
part of the research. You go and, like, you look it up. You find these things out. So I think specificity, we talk about specificity in our work so much as actors and directors and playwrights and improvisers, be specific. When a playwright gives you specific details like locations and names and things in a show, how hard is it in this day and age, especially like what Abby said, jump,
Mm.
Google it, find it out. What is like an actress going, okay, Durkee's dressing, who's playing Amanda? Durkee's. Okay, what is that? I'll just look it up really fast because they still sell it. They still sell it in St. Louis, still available. You can find it in every grocery store.
Oh, wow, we're learning about mustards on Art of Darkness here. This is not in my outline. I'm really enjoying it. Here's a little bit of fun reading about Williams and his youth. This is just right from Wikipedia. When he was 8 years old, his father was promoted to a job at the home office of the International Shoe Company in St. Louis. His mother's continual search for a more appropriate home, as well as his father's heavy drinking and loudly turbulent behavior, caused them to move numerous times around St. Louis. Williams attended Solden High School, a setting he referred to in his play, The Glass Menagerie. Later, he studied at University City High School. At age 16, Williams won third prize for an essay published in Smart Set. Can a good wife be a good sport? I wonder if we can
Oh.
find that PDF. I'm sure that would be a rousing read. A year later, and this is fascinating. A year later, his short story, The Vengeance of Nitocris, was published uh, as by Thomas Lanier Williams in the August 1928 issue of the magazine Weird Tales. I think we might have mentioned that at some point, but I think it's such an interesting thing that he was published in Weird Tales. In fact, I'm going to take a little sidebar and read more about that. I think maybe in the After Dark. I'm going to come back to that because that's fascinating. These early publications, and of course, Weird Tales is H.P. Lovecraft territory.
Yeah.
That's where all his stuff was published. These early publications did not lead to any significant recognition or appreciation of his talent, and he would struggle for more than a decade to establish his writing career. Never give up. Um, so yeah, just very interesting little bit of background about him. Matthew, I want to ask you a little more about St. Louis during that period and the city generally, because I'll confess I don't really know that much about it.
Mm.
It's on the river. It's on our beloved cursed river, the
Yeah.
Mississippi, the most cursed river on the planet, I truly believe. And Abby, you're going to be visiting soon, so I'll walk
Hmm.
you down to the river so we can have a look at the mighty Mississippi. Um, you were giving some hints about the character of St. Louis, sort of saying it's not the South, it's not the North, it's sort of right smack dab in the middle of the country on this river. Do you have any other poetic insights into the nature of your hometown, my friend?
I'd like to think so. You know, back there every year for family purposes, and my parents still live there, and a lot of family live there. Uh, when it comes to St. Louis, I love it, but I understand why other people don't like it. And when I visit, it's home. But a lot of people who've never been there judge it as like a place with issues and problems. At one point, it was like the third or fourth biggest city in the country in the United States. It's
Right.
why it hosted the 1904 World's Fair. Uh,
Hmm.
and meet me in St. Louis that all characters are waiting for to go to and everything. Um, and it's not any of those things. Like I said, like, it's not northern, it's not exactly southern, it's not exactly eastern, it's not western. It was the first big city built on the Mississippi and was the so-called gateway to the West. It's where westward expansion started from. It's where Lewis and Clark set off on the journey.
And they came through my hometown. This is my hometown is where they met Sacagawea famously. Lewis and Clark is a big part of our sort of mythology out where I'm from.
Oh, sure. And Lewis and Clark are a huge part of the St. Louis culture and westward expansion, Thomas Jefferson, the beginnings of the expansion and growth into the West. They started in St. Louis. Clark eventually became, I believe, governor of Missouri.
Yeah.
And then they came back through St. Louis when they returned on the return journey.
Hmm.
Um, that's why the arch, the big gateway arch that is most people are familiar with St. Louis because they've seen like a picture of the arch somewhere on something. It's inevitable that it'll be put in some sort of media that's about the city now that it's built. That's why the arch is there. It's a symbol of the westward expansion, the gateway to the west. National Jefferson Expansion Memorial is its official name. Gateway Arch. It's one of the smallest national parks in the country because it's the structure and the museum underneath it. It's a river city, river boats up and down it. Hannibal, Mark Twain is lived and grew up north of it, along the river. It's an industrial city in a lot of ways, uh, you know, like say Chicago or Pittsburgh. It's got industrial and industry work. It's also got, an Ivy League caliber college in Washington University where T.S. Eliot's father taught and everything. And I think he was president of it. I'm not sure. It's
Yeah,
where my mom,
that's where your mom went.
that's where my mom went to college, is Wash U,
Is that
YU.
right?
Hmm.
Yeah, when that hit my radar, that was one of the universities. I'm like, oh, this is a big deal. I looked it up. I'm like, oh, this is not okay. Interesting. Where is this? St. Louis? Okay. Uh, yeah, Matthew, kind of bringing it back around to your career as an actor. I love the turn that this has taken because this is why these dark rooms are so edifying because I kind of
Mm.
prepare some things, but then the guest always surprises me, especially when it's a working artist, which is most of our guests are. But you really are a journeyman actor, and you've been around. You've performed. Did 200 credits? I
Some-
mean, yeah, you are in demand. And so let me ask a question that's sort of around place. And I will say in my career as a playwright, you're one of the most game people I've ever encountered. You are a yes sayer. And you do improv too, which is
He does improv. Yes, and.
that's where you probably Matthew Saxe, yes and but you've performed all around the world.
yeah.
And what have you noticed about audiences in different places?
Oh, man. I'm not one of those actors who's ever been on a national tour, but I've been lucky enough to get to perform in a lot of different places. And in some cases for years in those places. Like I lived in LA for 8 years. So I performed, a lot of stuff over the course of 8 years. And audiences are different animals, location wise and the work that you're doing in front of them. Like most of the touring things I've done, or most places I've performed out of town at, have been improv places. Like I performed improv in Atlanta, Omaha, Chicago, and luckily Israel. When I was in Israel, I got to do some improv there and perform some improv there. And those audiences are kind of looking, they're looking for laughs usually.
Mm.
And when you can change something up on them, my improv group is known for doing a long form process where we improvise like an action movie. So it has some different elements to it. So one time we were performing in Atlanta and it was at a festival there and the crowds there were used to like, jokes and jokes and jokes and being funny and stuff like that. When I took a scene in a dramatic way where my character in this movie had lost their wife and was trying to get vengeance on the company that had blown up his house for trying to expose them. We did a flashback scene where I came home to my wife and turned out she was pregnant and I said to her, like, this is the happiest day of my life. I promise you, I'll always take care of you and nothing bad will ever happen to you. And the audience had already known that she had been killed in an explosion that I earlier. So if you watch the video of this performance, you can hear this girl in the audience going, "Oh, oh," and other people are laughing at the dark comedy aspects of it. Where I said, like, when I walked in the scene, it's like, "Oh, honey, you have nothing to worry about. There's nothing gonna happen." Like my wife, the actress playing my wife was like, "Oh, honey, I just don't trust the government. Like, I worry that something bad's gonna happen." Like, "Oh, honey, don't be scared. Nothing bad's ever gonna happen." And uh earlier in the scene in the set, like had been standing in front of a board, one of those classic conspiracy boards where like there's pins all over it and picture
Hmm.
things.
String.
Yeah. Oh, you sound like one of the, honey, don't be one of those nuts that has one of those boards with all the string and pins connected to it and everything. Um, and that audience had to come around. There were some people who were like, "Oh, this is funny. This is
Hmm.
dark." And there was that woman in the audience who was audibly going, "Oh, oh," because she felt so bad character, my pregnant wife character being killed and the
Aw.
broken life and how I'm trying to seek vengeance on these people who destroyed it. And that was an awesome feeling. So audiences are different animals. I don't know. The Atlanta audience, we could tell was looking for jokes and certain kinds of stuff. The Omaha audience, I didn't like that audience feel performing there. I don't know what they were looking for. It was late at night in a bar that wasn't used to hosting theater or comedy or improv. So I felt kind of off with them. Chicago, I remember feeling like they're sitting back, like, "Oh, let's see what you got. Let's see what you can do. We're hoping you'll do well." It wasn't negative.
Hmm.
It wasn't negative. It wasn't like, "Yeah, you're not going to be any good because you're not from here." It was more like, "Okay, we're open to seeing what you got. Show us something good." So and then there's audiences that just feel grateful. Like when I moved here from LA and the first play I did here in Minnesota at Lyric Arts up in Anoka, that audience was amazing. They felt so supportive and energetic and encouraging. And after the show, part of the policy at the theater there at the time was like you ran up the stairs after the show was over, and the cast would greet people in the audience as they were leaving. And I loved it. And people were so polite and enthusiastic, and they were wearing their heavy coats because we're doing the show in February when there's like 2 feet of snow out there and it's like negative 21 degrees. And they came out to see this play and they were amazing and friendly and supportive. And I was like, "Oh, I forgot that they could be like this after 8 years in LA."
Sure. You come back to the Minnesota nice is real. There is something to it, right? It's not, it didn't just come out of nowhere. Um, I want to kind of, we got maybe 10 more minutes before we take a break, then come back for the After Dark. I want to follow through with the promise of the premise here and talk a little bit about Beckett's influence on Williams' later plays.
Yeah,
So,
I would say
uh,
character.
yeah, go ahead. Go
Oh,
ahead.
Beckett's influence on Williams, one of Williams's later work is the two character play. And in looking at it, you can clearly see some influence from Beckett on the two character play.
It makes sense because Williams, in his career early on, he was known for this almost Baroque style. There's like a
Hmm.
lushness and a poetry to the language, and the characters are multifaceted, and it's not entirely clear when you're in a dream or in a fantasia. There's almost like a neo Gothic style to it, like a Southern Gothic. That's sort of what would be described as. And he's dealing with themes of madness and place and addiction. And I mean, there's no greater play than Streetcar. Streetcar, for people who
Hmm.
don't know, go back and listen to our greatest monster on Art of Darkness, Marlon Brando, the one of the greatest monsters we've covered so far, and how through Streetcar was the vehicle for him to change the way that people act,
Yeah.
in not the way people behave, but the way that actors act.
Hmm.
There was before Brando and after Brando, and it was before Streetcar and after Streetcar. I see you nodding, Matthew.
Yeah, oh yeah. Brando wouldn't have reached the audience he did and influenced the people he did if it weren't for the construction and writing of the character and the creation of the Stanley Kowalski character by Williams. And people like think of Williams as this effete, playwright, but he was able to create this rough
Hmm.
hard, brutal character of Stanley Kowalski that Brando latched onto and immediately knew, I know how to do this, and I can make this guy everything that you want. I can make him repulsive and sexy at the same time. Because that's to
Mm.
me the part of Kowalski. He's repulsive, but sexy, and he's rough,
Yes,
but
right.
honest.
Tortured masculinity.
Mhm.
Oh, I remember one of the most annoying people I've ever encountered in the theater was making the case that the other character in Williams was a better example of manhood and masculinity or something. Oh God, I can't even think about it. He was like, I mean, of course Kowalski's a villain, but he's
Yeah,
neither black nor white. He's a guy. He's a dude.
he's
Mm.
a working man. I can see like there's a lot of more. There's some nobility in Brick, if from Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Um, he's more. More. He's not as rough or as working class man as Stanley Kowalski. He's
Well,
he, he's
Brick is an alcoholic. Brick is an outright drunk, struggling with that right in your face. You don't get the impression that Kowalski, the Brando character, um, is a problem drinker.
yeah, but I can see how a person could say like Brick is a more noble character than Stanley Kowalski, who has no nobility whatsoever. Um, so I can see why Brick might be like more the ultimate Williams man in the sense because he's an athlete and physical and beautiful, but he's also a little he's honest in a different kind of way. He's not just a instinctual creature like Kowalski, like Stanley Kowalski. He knows what he's doing. He knows
Hmm.
what drinking himself to death. And
Yeah. His his description of the click is one of the best descriptions of addiction in literature.
I think
Okay, just Matthew, give me 1 second. So, just to introduce this idea of Beckett influencing Williams. So, of course, everybody knows Beckett was known for Godot and Endgame, and he revolutionized post-war theater with a stripped-down style that interrogated the theater itself, language itself. It's like deconstructed, reconstructed material, right? In his later years, Williams, who was already famous for his lush lyricism, began to incorporate elements reminiscent of Beckett's minimalism, fragmentation, and existentialism. And this is the thesis I found, and this is Vasilios Fragios, who is, I think this is like the University of Athens or something. You can find this online. It's Fragios. Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, School of English, Department of
Ah,
English Literature and Culture. I love it. I love that somebody in Greece is writing in English about Tennessee Williams and the Beckett influence on Tennessee Williams, and that this is one of the first Google search results I find. Just how
well,
wonderful is
it's the
that?
home of drama, so.
That's what I'm saying. Like, talk about full circle here. We come all the way back to Euripides, right? So, just real briefly, where is it? I lost my place. So, here's what some examples, right, of Beckettian absurdism in late Williams. There's a play called "In the Bar of a Tokyo Hotel," features characters trapped in a purgatorial space, reminiscent of Beckett's physically and emotionally confined figures. There's an example where specificity, where the airlock has been blown out by the
Mm.
playwright, and that's on purpose. Yeah, don't add specificity to that. That's the point, right? If it's in a no place, it's in a no place, right? Like, you don't want to necessarily set Godot in St.
A
Louis.
specific place. Yeah.
Right? Like, that's the point, right? If you do Godot in St. Louis, you're setting it in St. Louis. Yeah, go ahead,
I,
Matthew.
I think
Oh,
I
yeah.
think things that are existential or dystopic belong in a no place.
yeah, I wouldn't want to see Godot with the tree and everything and have the arch behind it
I will no I'll but you know what would be really funny? Maybe when I do my production of Godot, we will dress them in Minnesota professional sports gear. Like in the first scene,
Oh
the
my
first act,
God.
they'll be in twins gear, right? Because that's a very relatable experience for Minnesotans, is your team never makes it.
It
That's
is.
some very
Waiting for a trophy.
yeah, right, waiting for the playoffs. Um, here are two more examples. The two character play, which you mentioned earlier, Matthew, 1967, breaks the boundaries of theatrical form using repeated lines and disruptive, unfinished speech patterns, much like Beckett's elliptical dialogues. And then there's one more, which is even earlier, 1963. The Milk Train Doesn't Stop Here Anymore showcases Williams' move toward tragicomedy, a comedic look at death and human frailty, echoing Godot and Endgame. Any thoughts on that, Matthew?
I think The Milk Train Doesn't Stop Here Anymore is a show I saw like in college that was staged. I've seen a lot of unlike, a lot of people know obviously Williams from the big shows,
Mm.
Streetcar, Menagerie. Those are the big three when you think of Williams. But I'm lucky in that I've been in one of his one acts. I've seen two of his one acts, like The Milk Train Doesn't Stop Here Anymore, I think is what the one is one I saw. If it's the same one I'm thinking of where these two kind of kids are out playing on these train tracks, and they know they're safe because the trains don't go through it anymore. And it's a two character show, and the dialogue is kind of non-specific, and it's kind of in some places it's a little flirty from between the girl and the boy character. In other places it's very obscure. Another example would be Auto da Fe, which is about a mother and son in their sitting on the porch of their house. I saw that as well. So these shows, these shorter shows, I can definitely see how they, and especially two character play, hugely influenced by Beckett. And so I can see Williams, who always was trying to, to his credit, he wasn't trying to do the same thing over and over again. He wanted to expand his repertoire and try new things. And that's what something else that connects, I think, Williams and Beckett. Beckett wrote plays for radio and for television. Um, and but never had like any of his plays adapted to be a film, a movie. Well,
Mm.
Williams, obviously the film version of Streetcar became so influential with Brando's Kowalski screaming for Stella on the screen and everything that people who couldn't have gone to Broadway to see this landmark performance got to see it when they watched the film of Streetcar. So I think like that the Milk Train Doesn't Stop Here Anymore. Yeah, it's definitely got Beckett tones because it's in an abandoned, dilapidated railway sort of station and on the tracks, and the kids are playing on the tracks. Like Bay, which ends with a character, as I remember, burning their house down, going into the house and lighting it on fire while their mother's out on the porch after the play's actions have gone too. Feels very Beckett as well. You're not sure where their house is and what neighborhood it is and everything like that. And Beckett, of course, is famous for with the landscape of Godot, just the tree being there and the moon on the back.
Mm-hmm.
Endgame in the house on the beach that you hear about, but you don't see outside of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
With the
Yeah,
character trash.
I think it makes sense that Williams moved in that direction. It's like sort of you couldn't get more lush or ornate or poetical than he was. So what direction could he go? I mean, short of like writing straight lyrical plays, and I don't know if he ever did that. It wouldn't surprise me if there's a miscellany where he maybe attempted that, but to go
Yeah.
the other direction makes sense. He went, yeah.
Night of the Iguana, which is in, like I believe South America or whatever. And when I saw Night of the Iguana at Alabama Shakespeare Festival, there was a little waterfall on stage, and
Mm.
it's jungle on in the beach, and it's
Hmm.
you said lush. It's all lush. It's
Right.
literally about a lush. This
Right. Sure.
on doing the bus tours to this tropical quote unquote paradise and tropical resort that's in the rainforest. And like I said, when I saw it at Alabama Shakespeare Festival, they had a literal waterfall on stage along with like all the discussion of the jungle, and the beach, and the iguanas. Um, Once you've written that, because it was a later show, it was after all those other shows. Where else are you going to go if you're Williams? Like now you've written a show that's lush and is, got a bus in it and a hotel resort and a waterfall. in the jungle. Now I'm going to go the opposite way and try and be a little more stark and put people just
Mhm.
abandoned places and empty places and an empty porch and an empty dilapidated railroad station, or in two character play, like a room, like an empty room, and I'll leave
Mm,
trapped. And
right.
that's pure Beckett. That's Beckett. That's doing stuff that Beckett was doing.
Right, right. Yeah, and that's sort of the playwright, the author himself doing the work that maybe certain productions instinctually try to do to sort of generalize things. If there's one takeaway from this episode, it's that let the author do it. Trust the text, right? Matthew, this has been a real pleasure. Where can people find you online, and what do you have coming up next? What are you doing?
Oh, wow. I just booked a show this week. So
Are you
uh,
sure?
I
Yeah, did you?
it'll be coming up. It's called Finding Jay Mitchell. It's going to be at the Gremlin Theater in St. Paul, where I did last year. I performed Rope by
Ah,
yeah,
Hell yeah.
yeah, great stuff. So it's a mystery play, Finding Jay Mitchell. That'll be coming up later this year. You can always find me, with the Dark Pony Productions,
hmm.
performing our podcast, the Dark Pony Radio Show, which, obviously you and Abby wrote Basilisk, Eternal September Part 1, and The King's Pack Part.
Mhm.
I always
Hmm.
listen to those with me and Amanda. Being doing something together. If you didn't get to see Moderation with us, you can listen to us do this, both parts of Basilisk, which were amazing to do and incredible. So that's our theater company podcast, Dark Pony Radio, episodes every month. We're still doing a drinking game Minnesota. We've got shows coming up at the Bryant Lake Bowl and at the Hive. So there's shows there, sometimes two a month, sometimes one a month. But you can find it all on the Dark Pony Productions uh, webpage. Me, Matt Kelly, who's been a guest on the show, uh, and our friends, Max, Nicole, Mara, Mike, Jackson, Lily. We're all doing our things still, monthly shows, and we'll see what comes down the track. I'm hoping that more things will come up as the year progresses. I've been traveling and working so much I haven't been doing a lot of performing around town anymore. And hopefully my improv group Last Action Movie will have some gigs coming up soon too. But I'm around.
All
I'm
right.
and I'm on in all around the places. But I think if you want to hear a lot of my work, Dark Pony Radio podcast, I'm in almost every episode in one way or another. Some more featured than others, and I always encourage people to go and check it out if you want to hear a cool horror radio podcast.
Yes, go and
Are
listen
you
to.
involved in the Edinburgh show?
I'm not. Just
Uh,
like I'm not going to be coming to Edinburgh, but our company, Matt Kelly, has taken a show. He wrote and he's going to direct to Edinburgh, to the Edinburgh Fringe, which is amazing. So you'll find more information about that, and we're doing fundraising for it on our website and on our social media. So I always want to encourage people to, help us get our cast and crew to Scotland for the festival in August. We're all really excited and proud about that happening. So if you go to our social media, Dark Pony Productions, we're all on Instagram, all on Facebook. You can find links to donate to getting our cast and crew to come to the Edinburgh Fringe with our show that's going there, which is going to be, I think, something really special.
Awesome.
awesome.
Uh, Matthew, before we come back for the After Dark, where we're going to talk all about Tennessee Williams' sex life and read some poetry, which is fun. I love doing this show. Alabama football.
Yes,
What's the record next season? Your prediction?
I always hope it'll be 15-0 in a national championship. Uh, I'm going to go with 13-1.
13. So playoffs.
Sure, this year we're not going to get denied. We're going to the playoffs. I saw some prognosticators saying in their prediction of the SEC next year, like, oh, why is an Alabama or an Alabama game on this list? Because I don't think they're going to be very good. No, we had a year under the system with Coach DeBoer. I'm concerned about quarterback, but we've got some options. We'll see who emerges from the quarterback battle this spring and over the course of summer practice leading into the season. But I have faith that with the new system, we got a new offensive coordinator. We had a great recruiting class. I have faith in Coach DeBoer. This year was for Alabama. I was not happy with it, but I never will doubt.
So does that L come in the playoffs, or and who does it come to? Georgia.
I don't think we're playing Georgia in the regular season. I think with the SEC schedule, always it's tough. It's nearly impossible to finish undefeated. So we're gonna get by somebody.
Okay, Vanderbilt.
No,
it's not gonna happen 2 years in a row.
No.
Matthew. Somebody else said, and we're gonna stop it. We're gonna come back for the after dark. But somebody else had an idea on Twitter. Was like, I want to start a podcast where artists talk about sports. I'm like, I would go on that show. I would listen to that show. But that's a different show. The great Matthew Saxe. Matthew, we will take a 5-minute break. We'll come back. Same link, and see you on the after dark for patrons. Patreon.com/artofdarkpod. Thank you for coming on, Matthew.
Thank you. Thank you so much.